Part 2. Photography. I've recently fallen in love with photography all over again. I was given a Russian Zenit 3M with an Industar 50mm 3.5, and it was like discovering this beautiful art form from the beginning. I had previously shot with a first-generation Sony A7S, which since broke a few months after getting the Zenit. I didn't have the money to replace the Sony, but I could afford at-home development kit and chemicals and saved up for a flatbed scanner. So I went all in with this film thing, and I'm so happy I did. Film is more rewarding than digital in so many ways. I spent the first months, almost the entire summer, taking photos but being too broke to develop them. When I finally saved up enough, it was on to developing from home, then waiting over a month to afford a scanner. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I love the challenge. I'm okay not having things immediately, especially if there's a whole process of discovering a new medium going alongside. Like, I honestly never got frustrated or wanted to switch out for a digital camera. Patience is definitely key, especially in analog photography, and I knew that going in. I think I've become a better photographer through this medium. I think there's something to be said about switching tools, because if you stick to the same thing, you reach a plateau eventually. I felt the same thing when I switched to the A7S. I was honestly taking better photos and was pushing myself more. There was a mental block up, and using a different tool helped push me. I think the end goal is getting to the point where there's many tools to choose from, whether analog or digital, and selecting the best fit for the job at hand. I currently have the Zenit 3M and another Zenit, the E with an M42 mount. They're old, especially the 3M, but I love the character that comes with them. Going back to tangible things, these cameras were built to last, and it shows. The glass isn't perfect, and the shutter speed is probably slightly off, but it's unique. If it's the right tool for the right job, then I'll gladly carry it with me over a more pristine counterpart. And you get to pick film stocks! There's emotion in how you choose your stock and how you wish to process it. Yeah, there's the thought put into the final look after processing digital photos too, but it's way more deliberate feeling with analog, because raw files aren't the same. Especially if you're into print, which I cannot wait to get into. My current go-to stock is Fuji C200, which I push 2 stops to 800 ASA, and because it's cheaper film, I've been really able to play and experiment with it in quantities. Black and white is another world which I love dearly. Going back to my cinematography roots, I always love framing for the many shades of grey painted in the light. Shooting more deliberately is something I feel like was always instilled in me, but definitely reinforced when starting 35mm photography. I was definitely way too careful in the beginning, and would have a roll of film in the camera for weeks, just taking snapshots here and there. But the mistake I made was that this actually isn't careful, it's quite the opposite. Because film has a risk factor, and because it also wants the respect it deserves, it should always be shot in a timely manner. Having all the photos from your shoot fit into a single roll of film is great, but what if something goes wrong? With that, I understood that there's a balance. I want enough photos that there's plenty of good material to choose from, and I don't want too many where I'm pulling my hair out from overshooting. Photography has always been more of a hobby of mine, and it goes hand in hand beautifully with my filmmaking background. My first stills camera was some Kodak digital thing that I made stop-motion videos out of Lego with, known as brick films. These brick films involve things breaking mostly, and some involve my cousin's narration of the events going on. But it was a beginning, and it's where I fell in love with visual storytelling. I haven't really done stop-motion since, but would love to dabble in it again. I generally gravitate towards portraits or just abstract stuff when it comes to my photography. There's so much history and emotion in someone's eyes, and I'm learning more and more how to capture a person just as they are. I think I value that more than a pretty pose. In an ideal world, the soul of a person is captured through a pretty pose anyway. I believe in verisimilitude, therefore I believe the best outcome will simply happen if it comes from the right place. I'm taking photography more deliberately recently. Funny, because as I type this, or as I read this, I've barely shot this year. But sometimes thinking is growth in its own right. Taking time off can yield fantastic results just because the brain has had time to recollect. I've mostly taken photos for fun as opposed to work, so it's a little different speaking about photography versus filmmaking or directing. I make films for fun too, but you know what I mean. Photography can always be an escape, it's just me. Stills are much more easily a singular controlled vision, and the process start to finish is achieved single-handedly much easier than if one were to approach a film the same way. Unless, of course, you were talking about screenwriting.